first, in our labeling adventure, the first thing I'd like to do is just do a very brief, super brief overview of, okay, what's my thought process for labeling? So look at your LISA homework, it can be sort of overwhelming. So how do we make it manageable into small bites? So if this feels redundant, just kind of go along, but I want to do just a quick overview of our thought process. So let's look at first just a few pure rhythms. I have the manual up on the board. So this is some pure rhythms, and then at the bottom there's a mixed, okay? So I'm just going to loosely go from what I see there. So let's say your data looks something like this. Here's Sebastian's his big strain in free flow. And his release. And then let's do some and then let's do some of these, and then let's do some of these, and let's drift off. Okay. So, like we were saying earlier, the reason why we don't try to analyze what rhythm it is while we're writing is because that skill is applied now on paper, okay? So the first skill we develop is attunement and writing and connecting on a body level. The next skill we build is picking apart all of our ink. And this is where we can get cognitive and more analytical, okay? So the process of labeling is we're documenting change. That's what we're doing, okay? So we start and we say, okay, what's the first thing I see? First thing I see is I start at the neutral line and I see what looks to be a pure sucking rhythm. Okay, so I'm looking for, does this look pure or mixed? And this definitely fits all of what I know of what a pure suck looks like. So I'm going to label it because the sucking rhythm is in the oral phase. Okay, I'm going to label it with an O. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is psychoanalytic terminology, but it's only for the purposes of labeling. So if you're not into psychoanalytic theory, that's fine. This is just for label's sake. So we've got our phases of oral. What's after oral? Renal, and then that's the sound of the intergenital rhythm too. So that really works. And then the outer
It's been a
genital.
long time.
I thought maybe you missed something in there, but there's five plus times 2.
Well, see, that's why I say sometimes, you know, repetition isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I feel like we integrate things at deeper and deeper levels, so we can, you know, think of it that way. So, the first letter of each developmental phase is what is used to identify the rhythm of that phase. If there's any time you want me to stop, just please let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. Okay. So we know that the sucking rhythm is the oral, so we're going to label the change was going down into bound, and here we have another suck. So we're labeling the bumps or the humps or the singular waves one at a time. Okay? Would someone mind, you know, starting something? Thank you. Okay. So here's an O, here's an O. This is supposed to be a sucking rhythm, a clear suck. We know that this looks like the biting rhythm. That's also in the O, but what's different about it?
Right, it's
fighting.
It's a fighting rhythm, so we've gotta, that's right. So we have to differentiate not only what phase, but within that phase, is it, right, is it indulging? I'll just use the I for indulging, or is it fighting? So any fighting rhythm always has an S added, tacked onto the end, okay? So a fighting rhythm is going to be, as we saw before, an OS, okay? Again, let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow. Please, please let me know. Okay. So this is the first step, is making sure that we label each individual marking that happens above the line or below the line. So when we look at the pure rhythms, it's pretty clear. If something is clearly what looks to you like a pure rhythm from start to finish in relationship to the line, that's pretty straightforward. Then after we have labeled, like let's say we've got a succession of similar rhythms, just a review from last time, we can count that we've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 O's. So we're just going to write that underneath. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 OS's. Okay. So we're going to repeat that for all of the pure rhythms, or for all the rhythms in general. But that's the process for marking anything that looks pure, okay? So any question about that? Because I don't feel the need to keep repeating that. I feel like we've got that, right? Okay. So now I want to use the example that's in your KMP manual, which is this bottom mixed rhythm right here. So since we're fine with these, I'm just gonna recreate the line for the mixed rhythm, okay? And impeccably straight line. All right. All right, so we have something that starts in free, behind empty, and then goes to bound. And it's like a okay. So let's say, so I'm going to add on to this actually because I want to show you how to differentiate. Okay. So let's say that this is actually where, lies this homework data starts, okay? So, first thing we do, we start where there is ink, and we look at the pattern. And I say to myself, okay, this to me looks like a pure rhythm. Do we all agree that this looks like a pure rhythm? And which one does it look like? And the label is? OG. Yes. Outer genital, and it's indulgent, so we don't need it. Great. So this is an OG. We've said all we can say. Now we look for the next change. So the next change is here, is this bump right here. So does this look pure or mixed? Pure. Pure. It's the same. So OG. That's your labeling process, is, okay, for number one, does this look pure or mixed? Great. Is it, high or low? Like what mixed rhythm does it most closely resemble to me? Give it a label and then move on to the next change. So that's essentially the labeling process. So here we've got another OG. So we've got two OGs. Okay. So now what happens? What's the next change that happens? We cross the line and now we've got, whoa, something happens where this does not look like a pure rhythm. So now I know I'm in mixed rhythm territory. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, what I'm seeing here, or let's open it up to the group. What are some things that you're seeing? Okay, and how do you know
Twisting to me,
you're seeing, okay, so you're seeing twisting
but not in that little, I don't know what that little crevice is, but then it turns into twisting.
right here?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a crevice, it turns into twisting. So one way that we can do this is we can say, okay, we know we've got some twisting, anal phase, so I'm just gonna write, we know we've got some A's going on. Someone said a strain release.
Yeah.
So we can see, oh, okay, there's a flavor of the strain release, okay? And we've got enough of it because we've got the edges of the box, right? We've got, you know, we've got a pretty clear indicator. They're not like perfectly up and down, but they're pretty close enough. They're not like perfectly 90 degrees, but they're pretty darn close. So that's enough to say, yeah, this is generally, this looks like a container rhythm, so it's a big container. So we've got an AS. So I'm just gonna list these for now. We've got an AS, we've got an A. So we've got that. And then it kind of drifts off. So that, but the thing is, this drifts off into 3, and we kind of want to look at just what's in the box for now, okay? So what happens is when you look at your writing, try to look and see where in relation to the line, the box, if it's a box, where does it start and where does it finish? And if you need to, make little marks just to show yourself so you're clear. So you could say, okay, I'm just going to call it from here to here. So I'm only going to focus on this. And then it changes into something else. So so I'm only going to focus on this for now, okay? Because you're going to have a smattering of writing. So what you need to do is see where your start and end points are, and one good place to begin is to say, okay, where does it start from the line and where does it end? And does that kind of look like one mixed rhythm to me? So here, we've got this sort of, and I didn't do a really good job of it, but right here at the beginning, it's a little more kind of drifty looking because it's like just like a little long diagonal line, and it kind of looks like a drift. I'm going to drift. I'm just going to sort of drift downward. Okay. It's sort of, there's just like this teeny tiny little diagonal, and that looks like a run drift. So I'm going to add a U. So now I have addressed everything that's in the box. I've said there's a box, and here are some contents in the box. And with a mixed rhythm, we want to know how many of each item is inside that box, in a contained mixed rhythm, that is. Okay? So what we do is same process. We said we saw the A's. And we want to give credit to each individual curve of the twist. So each curve gets one count. So if you want to, you can label each one with an A, as we remember from last time. Or you could just give each A like a dot. You could just say, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. However you want to do it is fine, as long as you're clear for yourself how you're capturing this, okay? And then we add a little exponent to let us know that inside this box are 5 twists. We saw here, we've got 1 U, that looks about, thank you, that looks about the size of 1 U. And because this looks pretty close to a box shape. We're gonna underline the AS to give it credit as like a really, it's almost a box. And so that's a pretty big rhythm. The straight release is a big rhythm. So we just wanna give it credit for being big. So we underline it. It's kind of a big deal, in other words. So, once we have all our ingredients, we need to write them in developmental order. So in your mixed rhythms, you're gonna write all of this in developmental order. So the second piece is we start with the fighting rhythm first. So if you've got, say, a rhythm that looks kind of like a bite and a suck, we know it's got an O and we know it's got an OS. So if you're in the same line of development, for ease sake, we start with the fighting rhythm first when we label, so that's an OSO. So be clear on all this. Am I too fast?
Yeah, what's,
Yeah.
Hmm?
I think it would be like O and OS, like,
Just also why?
yeah, why?
Where did that come from? Because I feel like that, in the book at least, and when we learn the rhythms, it's indulgent and then fighting.
Right. So another way to think of it, or an additional way to think of it is, theoretically, the fighting rhythms are more differentiated. Okay? So if we think of the biting rhythm, it's about self-differentiation, right? Or like strain release, they're more what's called differentiated or defined. And the fighting rhythms also help us get our needs met. So we need fighting rhythms to meet a need and to be clear. And also, the fighting rhythms help us move into the next phase of development. We'll get into this with interpretation, but so there's a theoretical explanation that writing, the fighting rhythm first in the label is a way to acknowledge that it's a differentiated and it's a rhythm that drives us into the next phase. So it's got kind of a, it's not like primary and secondary, but it's got that significant defined quality. So we put it first.
And that's only within the same phase, other than that, it's in developmental order.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is just another picky you thing. I know. But, and the other thing is, if you write OOS, it's kind of not as, like visually it's not as clear. I mean, this is debatable, right? We could debate this all day long, but it's a rule. So at the end of the day, it's a rule, and for consistency's sake, this happens to be the rule that we're setting up for ourselves. Okay. But other than that, we write in developmental order, and we write, if we're in the same phase, we write the fighting rhythm first. Okay. Oh, and do I have a, I just want to get the AMP chart up really quick. Stand by. So if you look at a diagram, probably could have done this in the, that's okay. Let's look at Carlos's. Find it. So, if you're looking at diagrams, yes, the indulgent ones are on the left and the fighting ones are always on the right. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but in terms of thinking about the fighting qualities as like the driving forces that kind of drive us ahead, maybe that's another way to think about when you're writing. So I'm not meaning to confuse you more, but for some people who like to get a little more analytical, yeah,
You said that you start with a fighting rhythm if they're in the same phase, what if they're in different phases, so like.
All right, so let's look at this one. Yeah. So, so now that we've got those tools, what do we do with this box that we've got here? So, we've got developmental order to think about, and we happen to have two rhythms that are in the same phase, okay? So this is a perfect way to demonstrate both of these skills, is that, I'm gonna write in red just so you can see. So, we've got, which two are in the same phase? AS and the A, so which one comes first?
Yes.
Okay. And we gave it credit because it was underlined. And then we have, because it's a container, now they wrote it differently. Remember I talked about there's different ways to write, but the AS is containing an A, so that's the developmental order and the fighting rhythm coming first, okay? The A, so we've checked those two, and it's also containing a U.
I feel like I'm back in algebra.
I know, it's very stressful.
Well, just think of it this way. Let's think of it this way. Let's breathe some life into what's on this paper. What you have on paper is someone's body movement and someone's needs that they have expressed. So let's take this on a more personal, intimate level. So in terms of honoring the fact that we have attuned to someone and we have given them, we've seen them and allowed our seeing them to be put on paper. And so what we can think of it as is like, okay, Liza was expressing a lot, and there's a lot that the naked eye can miss, but my hand captured a lot. So let's dive in and see what she was telling us. So let's treat it like an adventure that we're trying to, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's say that the rhythm that is holding the other rhythms does not, it happens at a later point in development than what it's containing. So I don't know if
Can you show, it's helpful if I see it, because remember, we're interpreting based on what we see on paper.
okay,
So-
what if a swaying?
Will you draw, come draw something. Will you come draw something?
Can I just,
I'll do it, you want me to draw it?
sure, can you do
Yeah,
a,
have Morgan draw what you want to see.
a swaying with some running drifting?
Okay, so the two mixed together?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We've got a sway.
With some running drifting.
Now
In
with-
the sway, yeah.
Okay, so you want it mixed together.
Yeah, I want it mixed together, yeah, like
Me
that.
trying to mix it together, is
No,
that
that's
visible?
great. No, that's good.
Okay, yeah, great.
Because the swaying happens developmentally after.
Oh, I see what you
drifting.
mean. Yeah, good question.
So,
So
if it's
okay, any rhythm can be mixed with any rhythm. There are infinite number of combinations, and we'll talk in the interpretation, what does that mean? But, so the first thing to know is anything can be mixed with anything, okay? These are all ingredients that could all be mixed in any combination. So it doesn't, so that's fine. Now, in terms of, let's use this one here. So we know that, let's start, so from here to here, we'll say, okay, we've got an IG, but it's not really complete. It kind of it's got this long U kind of period here. So it's like flavors of the two of them.
Mhm.
So we know we've got the IG, and the U. They're both indulgent. The U comes first in development. So this whole thing, I'm going to call one U, UIG, and UE. Yeah?
So
So the thing is,
okay, because the swaying is the intergenital, so you place that one first, because it's holding
okay,
the running drifting, which is the urethra.
okay, I'm hearing what you're asking because it's a container rhythm.
Yes.
Okay, so one thing to know about the urethral rhythm or about the running drifting rhythm is it derails another rhythm. It kind of throws it off course. So what that means is this isn't really a complete IG
Okay.
and it's not really a complete U. So the U kind of derails the IG. So it's not really a container.
Okay.
So something more of like an IG containing something would be, or does anyone want to give me something? Will someone come up and just invent a rhythm of, let's say, you've got a sway containing something else?
Containing a twist in maybe?
Yeah, please.
Well, I already did it, so if anybody wants to,
Okay.
or, 'cause I love the board. I'll do it again.
Yeah, great.
So, should I erase any of this, or should I just keep going? I mean, there's not a lot of space.
Whatever you want.
So. IG containing a twisting, so it would be like. Okay.
What do you all think?
Okay, because it has more of a sine curve.
Yes. And what we know about twisting is they're bumps that are turned on their sides, so that's another differentiation. How do I know if it's sucking or twisting? So sucking is like a sine wave where it's up and down. So again, if you're not sure, go to your manual and look back at the pure rhythms and just reacquaint yourself with, wait, what did that look like again? And does it seem more upright or does it seem more on its side? These are ways of discerning, okay? So, so in general, think of the running drifting rhythm, it's like water, it's kind of like derailed. So it may, like here we had a U, but it didn't derail. You still kind of got a really strong box, whereas, and this is where it kind of gets into like a debate. You're gonna sit there and debate with yourself, like, is it containing, is it not? So that's normal too.
Great.
So if you need to have a tantrum, that's fine. I did too, but don't tantrum on your paper because you'll need to hand it in to me. Like go, stomp seeds outside. Yeah, do whatever you need to do. But I'm going to use this one here because it's kind of in the middle. It's a container because we've clearly got a whole bowl where both of the sides seem relatively symmetrical. So that's another way to think of a container rhythm. How do I know if it's a container? It's pretty symmetrical. So if you're not sure, use that little thought is, okay, see how this UIG isn't really symmetrical? That's another way to think of it. And again, some of these are debatable and we could get really picky if we wanted to and say, well, I don't know. But at some point you have to make a choice and own it. So at this phase, you're integrating being able to distinguish between pure and mixed. So as long as you're doing that, that's where we're at right now, okay? Is anyone lost, confused, need a breath, need anything?
How would you write that?
Okay.
Would it just be
So how would we write this? So one way to say it is, what are the components in no particular order? We've got a IG, and we've got an A here. Now I could be really picky and say, well,
I know, I was looking at that too. I was like,
okay, but that's good, because that's the process, because you're gonna really fine tune, and you could say, this kind of looks like an A, So I'll give that credit for being there. So I'll label that. And when you do this in your homework, that's the skill where you're showing me, you know, this is what, this looks like an A to me. It's on its side, you know, so you're labeling these to show that you're seeing the differentiation, okay? So we've got 2 A's here. So how do we write this? We start in developmental order. But we've got a container rhythm. So we can say this IG is containing 2 A's. So it's interesting because right now we're just talking about the container rhythms, which have these special rules of underlining, excuse me.
So you underline any container.
You underline any container, so container rhythms are strain release, okay? So the AS, a swaying rhythm, okay? Yep. Now, we don't often see surging birthing rhythms. That's going to be the least common thing you're going to see. So you may see one, but just to follow the pattern, because the surging birthing rhythm looks like a bowl, you know, it's also symmetrical, it too is considered a container rhythm. So those are symmetrical. They look pretty symmetrical when they're part of a mixed rhythm. What can I clarify, if anything, at this point? Oh,
I had a question about some of the other, like, this is probably not correct, but like the derailing rhythms. So
Sure.
you said like running and drifting, I'm guessing also starting and stopping would be a derailer.
so really the running drifting is the only derailer because it's indulgent. The starting stopping has that differentiated
Okay.
fighting rhythm quality. So now when we interpret, we could argue if the person like derailed what they were doing, but or we could, I think a better way to do it is just to look at it rather than
Yeah.
talk about it. So maybe let's see what that would look like.
Starting and stopping is one that I'm having like a particular amount of difficulty with in terms of
Seeing it?
seeing it, notating
Okay.
it.
That's a good question. Let's look at the starting stopping rhythm. Let's create a line. Can I erase this? Does anyone need anything here? All right. So this is part of the fun of it because there's an element of uncertainty to this. But some of the first, a good place to start is to look at the rhythms in their pure format. So go back and say, okay, the starting stopping rhythm, I think, which is a little bit in here, it's got these little jagged, it's kind of that, okay, this is very different from this. It's subtle, but it's very different. The biting rhythm has that dakka, dakka, dakka. It's got that marching, symmetrical, sharp, carrot-like quality. So it's like the tip of the carrot. So with a biting rhythm, another rule to think about is it's got a 45-degree angle. I know, there it is. There it is.
So
There it is.
Yeah, like what I'm just looking at right now is like, I was trying to do a biting rhythm, but it was like curved at the top.
That's okay, that's all right.
So like,
That's
if it's
okay.
not 45 degrees, that's okay, right?
It is okay.
Okay.
Because you're learning how to do it.
Yeah.
You're learning how to do it. It's like, you know, when you are speaking a foreign language, or if someone is trying to speak to you and they're just learning English and maybe they didn't conjugate their verbs perfectly, but you understood what they're saying, right? you know, it's kind of like what's happening in your writing or what could be happening at this stage. Is that, yeah, you're close and it's not probably gonna be a perfect carrot like is in the manual, but you're just learning. So that's, you know, that's fine, totally fine. But I'm just saying, in terms of differentiating, how do I know if it's biting versus starting, stopping? This is one way you could tell. Because the starting, stopping rhythm is like a little, see, it's teeny tiny. They're like little thorns. So there's a difference between a thorn and like a carrot or a little mountain peak. So maybe try to think of different images that you could relate to. So with starting, stopping, it's sort of these little How do you count all that? Very slowly and very precisely. So for those of
I just had to
us,
ask that question.
so for those of us who have smaller handwriting, what you might want to do is, you know, maybe take a picture of it and enlarge it. I've had students do that, like enlarge it to 1000% if it's hard to count. But, so you'll count how many starting stoppings you saw. And let's say this is like, you know, 45.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
45.
But the point is, I'm trying to address Morgan's question is, what if you go along and how do you first determine, excuse me, if it's starting, stopping? So this is one rule for differentiating. This,
Is
Yep.
it OS or is that?
no, it's
Starting,
not,
stopping,
thank
okay.
you. I'm like, wait a minute.
That's what I was gonna say.
I was
that too.
waiting to see if someone would catch that.
Did you do that on purpose?
Yes.
No.
Of
Yes.
course.
Yes.
I did do it on purpose. Okay, so what's the starting, stopping label?
That's your right. US.
It's a US.
Third year of that.
Yes.
With the biting,
Mhm.
it goes up and below the line, with the starting and stopping, it can all be on above or all below.
Absolutely, great question. Yeah, great question. So some of the hardest rhythms to capture are the running, drifting, and the starting, stopping. Okay, so that's another thing I want to put out there is, it's like you're just learning this, and how do I go where to put the drift, above or below? At this stage, it's fine where it is, as long as you've captured that maybe there's just a little bit of an angle that you saw the drift. At this stage, that's what we're looking for. But you need to know, you know, if you happen to be teaching this to someone else, that the starting, stopping, running, drifting are the hardest to capture, okay? But if they're above or below the line at this point, it doesn't matter. As long as you captured them, that's fine. That's fine, at this stage of the game. As you continue to build your skill and really discern, oh, she was a little more balanced, oh, she was a little more free, that skill will emerge, okay? But for your Liza homework, we're just looking at rhythms. We don't, for these, the running, drifting, starting, stopping, you won't need to worry about whether she was above or below the line. It's irrelevant for the rhythms homework. Okay? But just keep in mind, it's hard for all of us. It's a life, like even for me, it's a hard rhythm to capture. So if someone is drifting, I really have to be like, okay, attune, okay, is she more bound? Oh no, she was free, okay. So it is a lifelong skill. It is super tricky. So it just is. Okay, what else can I, yes, Pyle?
Yes, I just wanted to hear this thought of the drifting rhythm, right? What do you think that? And you know, when someone, you know, is not doing anything, so whether do I have to just relate it as
Yes, yes,
continuation
Yes.
or a drifting rhythm? So,
yes.
so how to differentiate that?
If they're just sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it's tricky, and that's an example of why it's tricky, because when you're looking at a mover, you are attuning, and does it feel like they're a little more bound? And like evenly held, kind of like a strain? Because if it's more like this, See, I'm kind of holding it, so I'm probably gonna hold it like parallel, parallel, parallel. But if someone's a little more like this, so pick up your finger and really don't even think for just a minute, like take off your analysis and really just be with me for just a moment. Okay. Could you feel some, even somatically, at a somatic level, could you feel some differences? Where I was holding tension versus kind of like drifting out of it? So this is why it's a next level skill that you'll get through practice, because it's subtly attuning to changes in muscle tension. And it's simply a matter of practice. So at this phase of your journey, it's, you know, you're not gonna worry about, well, where was I with my Liza homework? But as long as you kept the pen moving, that shows us that she was still alive. If your pen stops, it means like, you know, life force stopped, so.
So if we have like a continuation like what you're mentioning,
Yep.
with Eliza, so do we have to label that with anything or?
Great, let's do it, let's do it. Okay. Everybody breathing with me? Please? Breathe. Stay with me. Okay, so does someone want to draw, do you want to draw? Morgan's our
Yes.
designated.
Of course.
Thank you.
No. It's not big.
But surging birthing is huge. Oh, it's huge. That's why we'll rarely see, yeah, surging birthing. We don't, that's another rule to think about. We don't often see a pure surge birth because in the scheme of things, it's,
Other
you
stuff
know, it's
is
like a
going on.
rainbow. What's that?
I just feel like when someone's doing that, there's other stuff going on in between, you're like always gonna see it in a mix with it.
It might be, yeah, unless someone is, you know, doing a pure movement like this, it'll
Or
probably.
like a deep breath or a yawn, like otherwise.
Yeah, it could, it could.
Like how they were doing last Tuesday, we kind of did it
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
were sitting. And, because I had no idea what that would look like as an adult, and it just kind of happened.
So that's the other thing, if you're not sure what something looks like, it's not a mental exercise, you've got to draw it out. That's why I keep reinforcing, in order to answer your questions, we need data to answer your questions, so that's another way to think of it. So, okay, thank you for notating me.
Sure.
So let's say, so does anyone remember the rule I gave about how to measure 1 unit of running drifting? No?
You measure the half of the another, I think, and then
Exactly.
join that.
Yes, you're right on the right track. So 1 unit of a running drifting is half of a sway. So what do I mean by that? Look, find one of your pure sways. That's not a pure sway, no. That's right. All right. Find a pure sway, which kind of looks like a sunset, or maybe a sunrise. Okay? Find a pure sway, find a center point, it's symmetrical, divide it in half, and the length of half is what we use to determine 1 unit of a run drift. So we've got from here to here, there's 1, from here to here, Right?
Basically for every like sway almost, there's like 2 running drifting in this case.
Yeah, and since we don't know what's gonna happen, we literally have to label as we go, because something could happen like in the air, so we, you know,
Yeah.
so, but it didn't. Okay. So then we count, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. And and you're gonna do the same thing, because U's can look, U's might be, you might have a period with Liza where you have something that looks like this.
Yeah, 90% of my data.
Yeah, 90%, yes. Okay. So what we have is not just a line. We're gonna go and say, okay, this looks pretty drifty, but maybe within the drift, we might even have a few twists, right? So really like discern, don't just decide that one long line is a drift. You really do need to discern, like actually, I'm gonna call this looks like a little point, so I'm gonna say that's a US right there, for example. Okay, so what I don't want you to do is just look and say, oh, okay, I have a bunch of straight lines, that's all you. No. You have to go through the whole thing, like every inch by inch, to make sure there were no variations, because you attuned to her, and maybe she was drifting, but maybe she had a little, like maybe she sniffed, right? So like, we want to capture that happened, right? So this brings up the next detail to look at is, because we're documenting change, one of the other changes is we're looking at this in relationship to the line, okay? So every time you cross the line from free into bound, that's a change. And we're going along the line one thing at a time. So keep in mind that if we change into bound, we could have like a container rhythm. And it could move into a different rhythm. So we don't just want to label one whole line necessarily. Because, for example, this to me, like if I'm looking at this, let's say this is my writing, this to me has like a little flavor of an A. But okay, so I'm looking from here to here. And then the minute we cross the line, that's a change. So we don't want to we want to stop at the line.
But would that still be like half
Okay.
of a thing though, because it's
So-
not as long as the other ones? So that'd be like one,
It's up to
two,
you to
three
decide.
and a half.
It's up to you to decide, but it's like, so for me, I might say, what I might say is, okay, you start where there's ink, and I might say, okay, from here, yes, this looks drifty, this line still looks drifty, but I'm gonna say that from here to here, it looks really drifty. So from this point to this point, I will measure individual units. So here's a U, here's a U, here's a U. Oh, but guess what? Here's a change, and we're documenting change. This has kind of an A, but it also still kind of has a U flavor to me because it's kind of diagonally drifty. So I'm going to add an IG, and I'm going to say that from this teeny tiny moment, from here to here, is an AIG. So what happens is, you're going to be going from rhythm to rhythm to rhythm to rhythm. So you might have a lot of mixed rhythms, one right after the other, which is why I say we're documenting change. So stay with me in this change thought
How
process.
is that
okay?
AIG?
So what I did was I made the choice to say, okay, here's my flow line. This is all U, this is a U. But to me, I see a little bit of this in there. This is just my brain that saw a little bit of a, I saw a little flavor. It wasn't a complete twist, but it had just a little bit of that. So I'm gonna give that credit. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Not IG, U. I'm so sorry. U. It had the running drifting quality, so it looks like an AU. That's why you're looking at this.
I was like, where's the
I'm
IG?
so sorry. good idea if I knew what I was probably. So,
Just a little bit.
sorry about that. Yes, this to me looked like an AU.
Okay.
Yes.
That I can see, I just
Yes.
did not see the AIG, I was like, oh,
Okay.
the IG.
Right. All right. So then I keep going. All right, my line keeps going, so I'm gonna, for a second, just take these marks off. Because I don't want to presuppose that this is just a whole running drifting, because there could be a little whoop in there. And I want to make sure I account for that, okay? So I'm looking for the change. And oh, we crossed the neutral line, so that could indicate maybe there's a container, we don't know. Let's find out. So let's just kind of see. Looks like we're kind of, this looks kind of like an IG, maybe a U, and then it kind of goes up a little bit, but it looks pretty much to me like a U. I'm gonna say up to here, because by the time I get to here, see how it kind of dips a little? I'm getting real picky. This is what you're gonna do. This is what the process is. I'm gonna say, you know, this to me has a little element of an IG, of a sway. It has a little element of a U. So I'm going to own it, and I'm gonna say, and it kind of does that quality from here to kind of here, and then it's like a straight line. So, let me go back. So, this is where I left off. This is an AU. So from here to here, I think this looks like a lot of just running drifting. So I'm going to divide that up into U segments. So let's say this is our measurement here. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 U's that happened. And then up, I made a choice to say, you know, this has a little bit of an IG, and I'm just going to own it. So I'm going to say from here to here, this looks like a UIG.